Today's film is a recommendation from Ukraine Hackett-Cantabrana, and it is The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, which was released on June 9th by director Bomani Story, and it stars Leia DeLeon Hayes, Denzel Whitaker, and Chad Coleman. And it is a modern day retelling of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I have read, taught, presented at academic conferences on Frankenstein more times than I can count. So I went into this with very high hopes, and I was not disappointed. The story is about Vicaria, and her last name is of Germanic, origin. So we assume she's Vicaria Frankenstein, who is a mad scientist, and her family has been torn apart by death. So it is her goal to defeat death. And she becomes the body snatcher in her neighborhood. And it sort of culminates when her brother Chris dies, and she's really, motivated to try to bring him back. And we have these nice homages to the Mary Shelley classics. Some of them are kind of in your face. She is zapping the monster with electricity. Her sketchbook of scientific ideas is labeled The Modern Prometheus. We have at the end another character, not Vicaria, but another character says, he's alive, and that it's alive, like the Boris Karloff movie. The monster at points is in a wall watching a family, just as he does in the novel. The monster befriends a small girl, which really, to me, was like, oh, that very famous scene in the Boris Karloff movie where they are making boats out of flowers and he's playing with young Maria by the water. It sort of made me tense up and go, oh no, here we go. So there's all these wonderful allusions back to the original Mary Shelley story. But it goes beyond that. And here's what I really like about the film. First, as I said, I've presented at academic conferences on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm quite familiar with her diaries at the time when she was writing Frankenstein. And I know at the time, we all know that famous story where she and Percy Shelley and Lord Byron are in the castle. But obviously, like as most writers know, that's sort of the germinating seed of the story. And then there were revisions and work on it. So there are aspects of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that are autobiographical, which I know sounds funny for a science fiction monster story, but she put in a lot of her feelings and anxieties and griefs and fears into the story. And one thing that we often forget when we talk about Mary Shelley is that when she was writing Frankenstein, she was in late adolescence. She was a teen. When movies depict that night in the castle, or even depict Mary Shelley and her relationship with Percy Shelley, they often cast an actress who looks to be in her mid to late 20s, and we sort of forget how young she was. So I really like that we have this young female scientist to sort of parallel the real life Mary Shelley. And both young women are really trying to find their place in an establishment that does not want them. Mary Shelley was really trying to be anti-establishment, especially she and her relationship with Percy Shelley. They were trying to buck against the sort of what society was expecting of them. But at the same time, she had this partner who was older, more famous, basically infamous, and she was under his shadow. And in the movie, we have Vicaria Frankenstein, who is trying to become this scientist. And she's living in the projects, and they keep referring to her going to the white school where she doesn't really quite fit in. Security is called on her at one point when she's disagreeing with her teacher, which seems a little extreme and seems sort of, again, like the way society is, treats Black people. So I thought that was a really nice, I like that connection. I like the young female scientist as opposed to the male scientist, because I think it really lines up with the original story that was written by a very young girl who was exploring her creativity. She was experimenting with her creativity, just like Vicaria is experimenting with science. I also really liked the monster in this story. When I watch the Boris Karloff, I'm not scared. When I read the novel, I'm not scared. Although when he says, "I'll see you on your wedding night," that's a little creepy. That does creep me out. But otherwise, I'm not really scared. The monster in this is scary. There were times when I was very uncomfortable and very tense. There's sort of some shadowy scenes where the monster's darting about. He's very menacing. They don't really give him much of a face. He's very like disturbing. He's almost like this shadow of a creature. Although when you see him, it's like gnarly. It's gross. But really, he's this looming shadow of a creature, which I think was a nice take on how Black men are viewed as sort of being like these interchangeable, threatening beings instead of being individuals who should really be looked at. And the movie goes even further with that, in that the characters, there are these drug dealers that are main characters, and they are not flat characters. There are nuances to them. There are complexities to them. Again, the theme is not, and no one's just a monster. You're not just a monster. You're reacting to your treatment by society. You're reacting to the injustices that you face. And that's what makes the monster. That's not who you are in your heart. And I really like that, because that is what Mary Shelley is doing. What's really interesting to me is and I know I'm going on and on, but this is a Frankenstein is a thing for me, just like Dracula is. In the original story, Victor Frankenstein is horrified by the monster and has no emotional connection to him. That horror is, ew, I created this thing that I don't love. In The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, it's the opposite. She's horrified by the monster because she recognizes him. She recognizes that underneath all of that, her brother is still there. And that it's really touching and really adds another layer to this film. So I really do recommend The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. I really enjoyed it. Even if you're not a Frankenstein fanatic, or you don't belong to the Church of Mary Shelley like I do, you may enjoy it as well, because it is good and it is a thriller, and it moves quickly, and there are a lot of other aspects to it beyond the Frankenstein story. My sidebar for today, since we're already talking about urban horror, I need to get on my soapbox and bang my drum, as I always do whenever anyone is willing to listen to me speak about vampire movies. I must recommend The Transfiguration, which was released in 2016, written and directed by Michael O'Shea, starring Eric Ruffin, Karen Scherches, and Lewis Scott. And it is in my top 5 vampire movies of all time. It is amazing. If you are a vampire purist as I am, if you are as obsessed with the mythology as I am, you will really enjoy this film, because the main character is as well. And he is in a desperate, sad place, and vampires are his escape to the point where he believes he is a vampire. And I'm not going to give anything away, but the ending is truly impactful, incredible, compelling. I love this movie. So if you have not seen it, try to find it and watch it. It is a fantastic piece of urban horror. It is in my top 5 vampire movies of all times.